Because that's where people take this. They think that if you stop hustling, it means just stop living. It's not that. It's just validating that you have a human body. You have a human body. And when things are coming up within that human body, the emotional availability is resting, is being in a mode of self-care, is being in a mode of taking that time to care for health and self.
Hello guys, this is the Daily Humans podcast. I am the seductive, alluring, very masculine voiced Nina, and
I love your description. That's nice. I am Ashley. I was trying to think of some words to add, adjectives to add, but nothing was coming up. So just Ashley.
that's not just Ashley, that's our beautiful special co-host, Ashley, with a D. Was it last time? I forgot. You had like a different last name on one of your packages.
What's the D?
Wasn't D? What was it?
No, what was it actually?
Ashley, whoa, that's what it was.
Whoa, that's it. Yeah, Ash Whoa. It was just Ash Whoa. Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, Ashley Woe, our talented actress, performer, comedian. She is one of a kind. One night only here today. So you're part of the early bird special. Welcome to the podcast. Let's give a big round of applause to Ashley Woe. Woo! Yeah, she's my favorite.
Person, so my comedian shows are at nighttime for a reason.
Oh, wow.
Mornings are tough. I don't know what I can bring out for any of you today, this morning. It's tonight on Nina's time.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. I came on here today. What? What did you say?
Whitney Houston said it best. I have nothing.
Oh yeah. I love that. That's a great Whitney Houston reference. See, she is funny. You got a joke in after all. But yeah, today was a little.
Don't forget your Q-tips, people. Always bring your Q-tips.
Yes, for the teary eyes. Whether you're crying or laughing, we'll never know. But
all of the above.
Yes. When it comes to just how this wonderful week has been on my end, if I may share, and the reason I sound like this today, if the mic does pick it up and you're listening, you're like, who's this man? It is still indeed me, Nina, but I have COVID and I'm coming off of it. So today's going to be fun. Probably by the end of this episode, I'm going to sound like Joe Crocker. Joe Crocker? You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see it?
Yeah. No worries. First thing that she says when we popped on to start recording is, I'm going to sound like a man soon because I'm going to start losing my voice. I mean, I don't really know if that's how it works. You'll probably just get more squeakier. When you lose your voice, I think that's the question. When you lose your voice, right? What do you notice the tone is?
There's barely any tone. There's just the raspiness. It's literally like sandpaper rubbing against each other.
Good description.
But how are you?
We will get through this episode. We will do it. Yeah. We are doing it.
Yes, of course.
Poor Nina. I said to her as well that absolute kudos to her jumping on, because when I'm sick, I hibernate like a bear. Yeah. I'm going into hibernation until it's finished. You can't, well, you tried to hibernate at least. But functioning when you're sick is just, especially talking about like relative subjects and stuff. It's just 10 times harder. And we like to work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
So massive kudos to you being here, honey, because I'd be under the sheets.
Thank
We'd be
you.
recording from that side. I just have the microphone under there. You wouldn't see me, you just hear me.
ASMR. No, I was definitely there today, though. Right before we hopped on, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I think I'm just gonna be in the bed, no makeup, and I won't have a care in the world. But then I was like, I'm gonna look back on that and I'm gonna regret it. So while you have me today with a voice, we'll never know when it will reappear next. But enjoy. And enjoy Joe Cocker tonight. He's a great musician.
Maybe going on the lines of like David Attenborough, because you have an ASMR voice. Yeah.
And today on the Daily Humans podcast, we shall
Now you
say.
sound like Gru from Despicable Me.
I don't know. I tried. I feel like David Attenborough has such a calming voice that I don't have that right now.
Aiden can do it really well. He does it really well.
Yeah.
The way that he can just catch on to that ASMR version. I said to him, "You should do ASMR." He hates it. He hates ASMR. So, and he's so good at it though. He could really monetize. Not monetize. What's the word? Starts with M. Is it monetize? There's somewhere where you can just like magnify your gift or your
Yeah.
talent, and they say, "Yeah, I'm still asleep." So the version of me that's here now is probably from some other different part of the universe, the multiverse.
Yeah.
Ashley's asleep in the bed, and we're connected. So I'm feeling her dream state. Yeah.
That's fine. You're getting today as a special one time only event, you're getting Sleepy Ash and Joe Cocker on the podcast. So it's going to be an interesting discussion, I think.
At this point, honey, I think you need to change it to Gru, because that was a really good Gru impression.
I didn't try to do an impression. I just spoke, but that's natural talent there, baby.
Thank you. We have the natural talent of just something random coming up and sounding like someone. That's the thing. You just free flow. You just try it out, and you will sound like something or someone.
Yeah.
You'll find out who.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you tried to sound like that other guy, then you sounded like Gru. Like you found a different way. Hooray.
Voice coaches are going to love me. Anyway, speaking of, I would say that song that I sang, "You Are So Beautiful," is a beautiful song, perfect for a special holiday for your special someone. And we just passed Valentine's Day, and I was able to surprise Ashley with a little love letter and a couple of my other friends, which I was very grateful for. But yeah, how was your guys' Valentine's Day? Did you have a beautiful romantic day with yourself, with your friends, Galentine's or whatever it's called, or are you just here with us listening to Joe Cocker and Sleepy Ash, which is just as romantic?
We have to wait for the answer, so let's have some silence.
Yeah.
Please take this moment to take a deep breath in and then take a deep breath out. We will be with you shortly.
Oh,
Yeah, she sent me, I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. She sent me a really beautiful love letter. I'm going to put them together eventually and create a book out of it. And I think that's going to be the way that I end it when I depart from this um, multiverse, this multiverse, and I move on to a different one. I'm going to leave that as my last hurrah.
yeah.
I think it's a really good idea. It was so cute. I said this to her. I felt really mushy on the inside, really mushy. Like
I'm
someone
really
just gave me
glad.
a big hug.
You know why I did it?
And why?
A few weeks ago, Ash and Jay, our beautiful, wonderful editor, author extraordinaire, Hall of Fame book writer, she, check out
As editing this, listening to that going, oh.
check out her book on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and anywhere where you can find books. Anyway, she said something as per usual. Ashley is so poetic and prophetic. Honestly, it blows my mind. But she said something that really hit me hard. Prophetic and poetic. That's what I called you.
I literally thought I heard pathetic and poetic. I was like, hey, that's poetic. So
No, prophetic.
I didn't even know that word existed. So here we are.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, so she said this beautiful thing, and that is love comes in so many different ways and so many different shapes and in so many different experiences. It does not just come in a one size package deal, as in like, I don't know what we were necessarily talking about, but I think it was something along the lines of like marriage, relationships, how people like project it out there and what actually is love. And we kind of confine ourselves to like this one idea of it. But love is everywhere and you can give it to everyone. And that really touched me because I'd read a book, don't ask me which one, that kind of touched upon this as well, where it's like you can give love to a person you're walking by on the street. You can give love to your friends. You don't have to have only one version of it in your mind and how to give to those people or to that person in one way, shape, or form. You can expand. And so I was like, the best way that I can be like, screw you, Valentine's Day, you capitalistic, money driven, no love, hating single people day is by giving love to my friends and expanding my, what's the word that I'm looking for? There's production, but that's machines. But like my expansion and how I show love with the people that I have in my life, even when they're not romantic connections. Though I'm sure in another life, Ashley and I will be partners, and then you can just like all wallow in pain because your love will never amount to ours. And then you can be sad on Valentine's Day, just like they try for us all single people to be. So, in another life.
It's one of those days where it makes it just projects this narrative. Ha ha ha! Suck it, you single fucks. You're single, and this day is going to remind you that you're single. But honestly, I love the narrative of I just kept to my own space, and I didn't feel a single thing over it. It was just another day, and I'm happy for those that celebrate it. You do you. You have your love moment. You do whatever you like. But no one deserves to feel bad for not having someone because then, in that mentality, and I'm going to go there, then you start to accept people just so you're not, in that loneliness bubble. And we don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want just accepting anyone into your space just so, these days was one day a year doesn't feel the way that people have projected it outwards to those that are not in partnership. Just to say that. But it was really nice. And we were talking about love amongst friendships and how some people, we were going to talk about that in an episode anyway, just people's ideologies of love. It's very attached to partnership only. And you'd be surprised just how many people don't consider love within friendships. And I don't think that's a bad thing in a way, but also, it is your choice how close you keep people. But at the same time, personally, I couldn't do life without the balance of friendship. Okay, and if there was a partnership, and then, family. I just couldn't do just having love for that one person and that's your entire world. And then, yeah, your friends just get this, in my opinion, this mediocre version of being there, but there's no connection of that. That's just my opinion of it, obviously. But yeah, I prefer that connection. personally. So that I'm glad that you had that little like, I'm going to spread this out to everyone because I felt it. Like I said, I went mushy. When she sends cards at Christmas time and I read them, I sit there and I just go, is it Christmas or is it like a love day? Another like version of just sprouts of love from the ground up or something like that. There's just so much love within the way that Nina expresses it. And I definitely think Jay's sitting there going, yes, as she's editing it. Yeah, we're both just nodding at the same time. So thank you for your love. Thank you for your card. And thank you for Nina.
And thank you for
Thank
your
you to your
friendship.
ancestors for coming down the line, the lineage, and then bringing you here.
Yeah,
Hallelujah.
thank you.
We need you. Your lineage needs you. You're so needed that it's just, I can't say it enough. You're so needed. Your ancestors literally stand there and clap when you express love the way that you do. 100%.
Thank you. That's beautiful. See, this is what I mean. You're like, oh, I'm still asleep, but no, you're awake on the inside. You're awake. You know what you're talking about, girl. But
Dream
I
reality,
appreciate
honey.
it.
This is me just saying all that through that. Because in a dream, you could do basically anything. Like, I could fly and then just drop. So at this point, that's the kind of state that I'm in.
Mhm.
But yes, continue.
I just really want to say thank you because it was just a great reminder of like there's kind of just like this there's no limit. Obviously we talk about this in many different forms on on this podcast, but there's no limit to how much love you can give. And I always want to be more loving. I always want to expand in that area. I constantly read books and do research and like try to understand myself. You can just say pause, you know.
No, I'm sorry.
It's
Keep
okay.
going. Oh, I'm sorry. It's because I'm in the wheelchair, right?
It's
And I'm going
we'll
to say
edit
this to
this
you.
part out.
I'm
We'll
moving
edit this
around a lot.
part out.
No, leave it in. Leave it in. This is human. But if I'm sitting in a certain place that's uncomfortable for the
Yeah.
leg, it sends like shooting, like it sends like these little pain
Mm,
signals. So I have to. I'm moving around a lot. I will move around a lot, even when she's talking. I don't mean to be
yeah.
rude, but
Yeah.
I had to move the chair a lot more this way. See, that's my wheelchair. Say hi to her. I named her Willie.
We can't see her, girl. But, you know, just
You,
as like a long distance thing, hi,
yeah,
Wheelie. Oh, there she is. Nice.
yeah.
Hello.
This is just her handle. This is her handle. Sorry. Please do continue.
No problem. And you weren't being rude. But there are so many different ways on how to show love and how to show appreciation and be there for the people in your life. And I've always felt like there was a little bit of like a capacity in which I could love within myself and what was acceptable to show within friendship. Because I was unfortunately growing up around a lot of emotionally unavailable and avoidant people, so that gave me more of a limited capacity of how I can show up for the people that I love depending on their role in my life. But I'm trying to eliminate all those things, all those lines, all those boundaries. Of course, each person will be different, each friend will be different, and I will always respect how they want to be appreciated, what their love language is and all of that. But within the capacity of where I'm at right now, being able to show love in the way that Ashley has shown love to me in return as well has just been exceedingly abundantly and beyond what I could imagine. And I just want to say thank you. Isn't there like a song like that? I don't know. I'm going to make a song. I just want to say thank you for your friendship. Yeah. Anyway.
You just made this up. I swear we've also had this discussion. We've had this same discussion on one of our episodes. I swear we have, where we've talked about the differences of
Yeah.
experiencing sort of an illusion version of care and love, and then experiencing the actual true version of that,
Yeah.
and how it feels so magnifying in self and the expansion of self. Like the more that you can feel something like that, it feels a lot more supportive, I think is the right way to say it. It really does. And emotional unavailability is actually a great, when you brought that up, I thought, oh my gosh, that's such a great topic of conversation. Where did you think about that?
I
Where
don't
did
know.
it
I just
come
thought about
from?
that. I don't know.
Was it from the
Just
guy that you
magic.
apparently are going to sound like later on? What's his name again?
What's whose name? Joe Cocker?
I did, yeah, yeah. Was it from him? Is that where you got the
Maybe.
emotional
Yeah.
unavailability idea from?
Yeah. He's like my
Yeah.
spirit guide. He tells me things, you know.
How does he show up? Is he like a human angel in a robe, or is it just his face?
It's just him in a suit, oddly enough. It's very formal.
Black
Yeah.
suit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "You are so beautiful to me." He's
You
very
asked
supportive.
why I thought about it. This is probably going to be a weird little thing to bring up, but you know, in the movie Grease,
Yeah.
you know, Grease, the part where what's her name? I can't remember her name, but she's in the cafe and the cafe is closing, and then a guy comes in and goes, "Beauty school dropout, go back to high school." Such a weird song. Anyway, I'm just like, I don't know why, but I thought of him like entering your room, singing a song to you. Most fascinating things come into my head sometimes.
That would be funny. Yeah.
It is Elvis kind of looking like costume that he had on. And then
Yeah.
the fog comes out of your room and it's like a white light and he comes in and has his microphone and then starts singing like love the something. Oh, the way you look tonight. The song.
Yeah. I love it.
That's my
I was
Valentine's
thinking
gift
more
to her.
Elton John than Elvis, but you know, it's just kind of like the same vibe. Elton John has been around forever, but yeah, no,
Elton John would be great.
yeah,
I
but
love the song that he made for Diana. Just to say that, just to add that in there,
yeah.
I love that song. You know the
What
song that
song
he
was
made
it?
for Diana?
No.
And he also sung it at Marilyn Monroe's funeral too, but he changed the lyrics a bit. Yeah, Candle in the Wind. Candle in the Wind. Yeah. And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind.
Ah, yes.
I love it. It actually makes me cry when I hear it because singing it at her funeral is just, yeah, it's one of those songs. I can hear it in my head now.
Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful song. I love that one as well. I can't recall a lot of Elton John songs off the top of my head, but there are many that I really do love, and he's an incredible musician. But yes, as we talked about Valentine's and love and relationships and our expansion of what we know to be healthy intimacy, healthy love, healthy relational relationships, healthy relational connections, rather, we're going to be talking about the opposite spectrum of it as well within our encounters of emotionally unavailable or avoidant types of people, how they have kind of played into our journey, how they affect others, everything in between. We think it is a pretty decent topic because obviously we are relational creatures, human beings, and this unfortunately affects many, as we've seen online with a lot of people talking about avoidant tendencies and avoidant personality types. So sit back with a little cup of tea. I have a lot to say about this, but I'm going to let you take the mic.
I honestly think that whoever wins rock, paper, scissors should start. Let's just jazzy it up a little bit.
Okay.
So get your fist ready.
I don't know. Hold on. I don't need this to be part of some kind of deep web internet compilation for things that do not need to be mentioned. Yes.
Okay, you can start.
Okay. Rock, paper, scissors.
No telepathy. You're gonna have to
Okay.
block it off like you do when I'm trying to read your mind.
Okay. Rock, paper, scissors. I can't see it. Oh, you won. You won. You have paper. I have rock. Okay.
I'm keeping you warm so that you win because you're warm. Oh, jeez, of course. You actually Google emotional unavailability. It does come up with some different context, but at the same time, emotionally unavailable. It's pretty much in it's just right there. When you say the word, it's right there. Emotionally unavailable. So I tend to use it more in the context of literally being unavailable to your human emotions. It's the best way to explain it, honestly, because people are, and for generations, as I say so many times, because obviously the lineage, if you go down your ancestral line, if you look at history, if you look at the traumatic events that happened in those times and just progress through the years and the decades, it shaped human beings to be in the stance of unavailable to human because you had to be for survival. You had to be for safety. You had to be to get up and move. History is literally the depiction of why people have become this way. And there's so many people that say things, and I said this in the last episode, they go, the past is irrelevant. The past holds the key to our learning now. It holds the key to us transitioning through the human experience because you take the past and you don't reenact it. You take the past and you learn about how they had to survive every day. And trauma passes down from generations. That's why it's called generational cycle breaking. It's called that for a reason. Generational trauma, it's called that for a reason. You know, if addiction has passed down the lineage, and then as a child you witness that, you essentially mold your self to your environments, especially as a child. That's why they say a child is like a sponge. You basically are a sponge, and you're just taking in everything from what's around you and growing within that. It's not until you get to a certain point can you start questioning, even if people are in the place to do so, questioning what they've been taught and how they've grown up. But my point is, as much as people don't want the past to be relevant, it is, and it has to be for us to learn from it. And being emotionally unavailable for survival is a part of our past and is a part of many and your lineage. 100%. 100%. No matter what, no matter where you came from and cultured, no matter where you came from and what cultural background you have, essentially, there is an element of survival there. There's an element. I mean, I'm not going to put it down and I'm not going to slap some labels on it because I know people talk about those that are wealthy in the way that they didn't have to go through survival. And look, I can't say that I know and I don't know, but at the same time, in the human experience, survival comes in many forms. And some had to survive extremely more than others, you know, but survival can show up in many different forms. You know, those that are wealthy can. There are actually so many stories of people that had wealth that lost majority of their family, and that's a survival. You know, that's trauma within itself. I'm not going to invalidate that for money. You know, people went through that kind of stuff, even being in a position of abundance or financially safe, we'll say. And then we have the other thing where financial aspects came in from the backs of other people. So I'm not going to go fully down the road. I'm just trying to validate that I understand the in the middle. Okay, I understand the one side of the spectrum and the other, and there are also multiples. Okay, you should know it by now. This is season 3, episode 3. No, not episode 3, episode 4.
Episode 4.
You would know by now. So coming back to it, the way that I think the conversations are going to unravel with this topic is on the lines of how it has affected our society. And obviously, being emotionally unavailable creates avoidance for the things that trigger something that we are unavailable to. So it all connects, and that's kind of the way we're going to unfold this episode. So I just had to say that first, that mentioning the past is incredibly relevant for so many different reasons. And if you don't want to validate that, that's your choice. But essentially, your traits, your personality, as well as your external looks, they come from your lineage. You are connected to your lineage. You are connected to the past and the things that have been passed down. And I mean, if you want to get into it, there are so many things out there to help you understand that, because it has helped me understand where my emotional unavailability came from. It wasn't just what I currently experienced in my present life, it also came from the female line and the male line. And I'm using female line as just that's the context of it, the female line and the male line, which, if you look up certain charts, will say they talk about the personality traits that were passed down from your ancestral lineage, and the same with the female line as well. And it just helped me understand a lot more why I do certain things and why I've been doing them since I was a teenager, since I was a child even. It's really interesting when you dive a bit deeper and know that not everything is face value. There's a lot more to our human behavior than just present moment. But, it is your choice how you take that, whether you believe it or not. But if there are certain things that are unexplainable within yourself, it's something to consider. I'm just putting it out there as guidance to look within your lineage and to know that the past plays a part in where we are today. And we're going to learn from it. Rock, paper, scissors, Nina's turn.
You explained that wonderfully. And where I kind of want to start off as well, in order of just to give more context, I think obviously for me personally, in my opinion, everything is on a spectrum, and human behavior, human psychology is on a spectrum as well. Emotionally avoidant behaviors can be on a spectrum without you having an avoidant personality disorder. So that is important for me to mention as well. You can have certain behaviors that are avoidant and not have it as an entire personality. There's so many things that essentially get you to have kind of like an emotional shutdown. I will talk about my story as well, because obviously I've also been emotionally unavailable in a lot of different situations in my life, which I was not aware to until people brought it up later. I've also had encounters with emotionally unavailable people that have played out differently within relationships and relational connection. So definitely this is a very deep topic, but it's important for me to mention, because online, obviously, it can be very divisive. I'm sure you can even look up online and find many different variations of the definition of being emotionally unavailable or being avoidant, whatever word you want to use, right? But it's important for me to emphasize that people who are emotionally unavailable or avoidant aren't evil people. Because I think in society we've kind of dubbed it as that. It's like there's the emotionally open, there's the, I don't know what the word is, the kind of like anxious attachment, there's the safe attachment, and then there are the avoidance. Ooh, stay away. But at the core of essentially who they are is just a very deep insecurity and fear of rejection within their own selves and with their own lives, which most likely, in some way, shape, or form, because this has a massive impact in all of our relational, how we communicate, all of this, and how we show up in our present day as adults, was manifested when they were young, when they were children, by their parents or by caretakers who either were extremely overbearing and made them carry the entire responsibility of everything, or in its complete opposite, let that child stand on their own, which made that individual in particular not comfortable with letting others in because they feel like they have to have it all together by themselves and they can't let anybody see them crack. You can't see me be weak, and I can't deal with rejection, so they push people away. There's this psychology of, I can't let this person in, so I have to push them away because of whatever base of assumptions they have about themselves. It is never a reflection of you and who you are. If you've been in a situation with an emotionally avoidant person, unavailable person, but it is essentially just very deep-rooted insecurity that people project. And while their actions need to be addressed and need to be held accountable, and it can deeply hurt, there should be no excuse for that. It should still be acknowledged that they are not like super evil people. They're not like us, they're still human beings. And so that was a very important point for me to bring up within this discussion as well. And obviously there's avoidant, emotionally unavailable people can play into many different traits of narcissism, superiority, psychopathy, and even there's a word I learned today called Machiavellianism, which is essentially just being very manipulative and self-interested, very domineering, and everything is a
A lot of
spectrum,
words.
essentially. Yes, very, very deep, big words that I've never heard before. So if I did not pronounce it right, I don't care.
It's fine. Sometimes I honestly get over I understand sort of the study behind it, but sometimes I get over the constant label with every human emotion or every human experience or every behavior. And I understand that there has to be a name to it to understand the science behind it. But yeah, some days I will be on TikTok and then someone will say, so if you do this, this, and this is what that is. And I think for some people, and I'm not going to put that down, it is comforting to have something to name it, because that's what I felt when I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. It's like something actually made sense having the name. But also, I think it just kind of goes a little too far in constantly giving everything a name. I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle of it. I get it, but also it's a bit excessive. It's a bit excessive. Human behavior, understanding that, I don't think we can have a baseline foundation, as in sort of a stamp, this is what it is. It's more like we go by our morals and values, what feels right, and just kindness, empathy, compassion, and the expansion of that. And the human experience is constantly a learning journey. So even in that, you will expand the way that you see that and feel that and have that. So that's also why I am, when it comes to all the labels and the titles that we give certain traits and behaviors and all that jam.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. You go ahead.
Essentially,
I was adding that in.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I think sometimes we can get so caught up in trying to label something. Obviously, I think in the psychology field, trying to study human behavior, you have to put a word on it. So you can, there's even subcategories, subgenres within the avoidant, anxious avoidant, you know,
Mhm.
all these different categories, which is great for people who study it, right? Who study human psychology, but people who are actively trying to heal and just move through life and
A
trying to
lot.
understand themselves better, right? It can just, yeah, like you said, it can be too much. It can be a lot. And you're like, well, am I anxious? Am I this? Am I that? And it can be a bit too
Yeah.
much. But essentially, at its base level, emotionally unavailable, if, or at the, if you are within the avoidant disorder, when it's an actual disorder, when it's kind of hooked, it's hooks into your life. I don't have a different word for it. It just at its very base form
Within
means
itself.
that these are people who do not relate in the same way that you or maybe somebody else does. I'm not going to say everybody because we don't have that study. We haven't tested every single human being on the face of this earth, but they just relate to people differently. They relate to people in a more detached way, which can, to other people who are not knowledgeable within that, who do not know how to deal with that, oftentimes children or younger people, etc., can be hurt by it because it's like, why are you being so cold? Why are you doing this? This is hurting me. Why don't you see that? And it's because in their psychology, due to whatever happened in life, they just show love differently. And in order to communicate that, in order to break that down and understand that, there's many different ways to do that. But today we shall be talking about a few of these aspects with how it's affected us, how it affects the world. Like you said, a lot of this does come from generational trauma, from our ancestors experiencing war and famine and insane hardships, no matter where you're at in the world. And so avoidance can come in all shapes and sizes. It's important. I guess where I would like to start off is with me, myself, and I, because I can speak for myself better than I can speak for anybody else. But I think, and I do believe we've mentioned this in previous episodes as well, when we've talked about toxic friendship dynamics and things like that. I was made aware a few years ago, I would say my early 20s, within friendships, where I was like, trying to console different friends, but I wasn't really understanding them to the level where they were at. And I was just trying to fix the situation rather than hearing them out and being there and being present. I was very much a fixer. And that's something that I still have within me, but I've learned to kind of like, okay, this person needs to just be heard. This person needs to have empathy be shown, and all of these things. I was a very emotionally unavailable person. And when I was first confronted with that, it really hurt my ego because I was like, no, I'm so caring. I'm so loving. What are you talking about? No, you just don't understand me. And I had to take a very hard look at myself and be like, you know, what you said there was very dismissive. You know, what you did there was not cool. You know what? And show up in a new way, essentially. And that took a lot of work. My gosh, because there were definitely moments where I did not understand people and when I felt misunderstood myself within this dynamic. Because I was always raised within a family dynamic where I was made out to be a drama queen, right? I'm over emotional, I cry too much, I have too much empathy, I care too much. People are just not, we're not understanding of where I was coming from. And I guess over the years, subconsciously I started shutting down to the point where I was still giving love and care, but it was not in the way that the other person in my life needed it. And I think obviously when you're a teenager, when you're young, when you're in teenage phase, kid phase to teenage phase, you don't really think about these things. You're just young, you just live your life. But it shows up when you enter adulthood and when you make more mature connections, whether that be within friendship, familial, relationship, romantic, whatever. And it often, I feel like it's a big gap of miscommunication that goes on there. And for fellow avoidants who are listening to this, or people who have traits and have had misunderstandings within their connections, I will just say this: it may feel daunting at first, You may have thoughts of like, oh, this person's being too emotional, or like, I don't understand what why is this person so angry over this or so emotional over this? Instead of viewing it like that, try to understand what their needs are in that moment and how you can best show up in that way. Because I think in a lot of ways, like I said earlier, when you are an avoidant and when you think you're just the standard human, you're just like, everybody's like me. Or maybe you don't have that opinion. I don't know. I walked around with that opinion for a long time until I was proven wrong in many ways. But when you walk around thinking that everybody does and thinks like you disconnect and you can hurt people inadvertently. And I've had this happen through text messages, through miscommunications. I've had fights with people where I'm like, why are we in a fight? I don't understand. But try to show up in a way that that person can receive you, instead of placing judgment of like, I don't understand why this person, but this is not a big deal. You can fix it. You can do this and this and this and that, and then the problem will be over. That may not be what that person needs in that moment. I mentioned this before in a prior episode, but I will mention it again because it is applicable for this, because it is within this dynamic. And I've had this be said to me, so I'm passing this forward to fellow avoidants on this planet. You know how people talk sometimes and you don't really listen to whatever it is they're saying. You listen with the intent to reply and you just hold on to whenever they stop speaking so you get your word in. That's essentially what you're doing relationally. You're not really receiving that person because you're not listening to what their needs are. And there's this book I read a while ago. It's called Silence, I believe, by Thich Nhat Hanh. I've mentioned him before. In prior episodes as well. But there was this beautiful quote that changed me forever and helped me kind of dismantle my avoidant tendencies and my ways of shutting down emotions. And that is, the way you communicate, this was in form of communication, the way you communicate with another person, you need to use words in a way that touches their heart and their mind can understand. And that can be a big task. When I heard that for the first time, I was like, oh my God, now I'm going to have to do all this extra work, all this extra labor just for that other person to understand me better. When I just want to be over here, make it quick, do this, do that, and be on with my day. But the thing is, you can't go through life thinking you can just hack a relationship. I think a lot of people do this these days. They think if I follow this step and this step and this step, if I say this and if I do that, everything will just come to me. Relationships are built on emotion, on being safe, on making somebody else feel safe. And that comes with very small intricacies, with tonal shifts in your voice, with the way you show up, with how you communicate, with how you treat somebody, how you do things for a person. There are so many very small intricacies within human connection that make a massive difference, and avoidance can be felt. So this is something that you can fix. This is something that you can absolutely expand in. I'm not perfect to this day. I still have moments where I'm like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? That was really cold. That was not my intention. Even in the way that I communicate, sometimes it comes off as cold, even when I don't mean it to be. But it's about becoming more aware. I feel like that's the catchphrase for our podcast. Become more aware, expand your awareness. But it is, because you don't want to be pushing people away for the rest of your life. Because a lot of the way that we treat each other relationally comes down to how we view ourselves and our sense of self-worth. If your avoidance comes from a place of, I don't want to be hurt by people, and therefore I will just cut people off before they have the chance to hurt me, or you can't let somebody in because you're used to just handling everything by yourself. Hello, that was me. Absolutely. Raise my hand immediately, because I was always raised to do everything by myself. Be independent, be strong, be productive, make everything come true in your life, and don't rely on anybody else because they will always let you down. And that kind of just seeped itself into my way of relating to people and the people that I was attracting as well. Because if you're emotionally unavailable, you will attract emotionally unavailable people. And when emotionally available people come in, then there tends to be some problems there, communication wise and friendship relational wise. But if it comes down to you not knowing how to let somebody in because of fear, because of pain from the past, you have every single right to heal that within yourself, because it is possible to become better at relationships and to treat people better. And obviously, there is a side to this conversation where being emotionally unavailable can really deeply hurt people, and the way you show up can be very narcissistic and very self-centered. Like I mentioned earlier, it can veer into these spaces and you can do some extreme harm. And I feel like it attests to a lot of what we see these days in the world and on social media, etc. But before I get into that, just know that there are ways for you to get help. You can go see a psychologist if you're open to that, a mentor, you can read books. There are many different avenues and how you can heal this, but it is healable, and you have the right to feel safe within your connections, even when it can feel like too much. Take it one day at a time and you're good to go. So yeah, I'll stop here. I'll give it over. I'll give the mic to Ash. And we'll see each other in a minute.
She's leaving. She's leaving the building. You said it beautifully. As always, you just have the gifts of the gab, the wisdom of the world, the flow of the sun. um I sound like I'm about to tell you like a really interesting story, but really I'm trying to think of where to go with it, only because we don't follow scripts for starters, for the reason that we keep it as, flowing human as possible.
Yeah.
And having a script isn't a bad thing, FYI. Sometimes notes are a thing, but I think that as the impact on society, it's kind of where I am going to mold this conversation to advocate for healing, right? And I know even that is subjective. I understand a lot of people, unfortunately, nothing frustrates me more than healing options, methods, and alternatives not being available to people because of the cost,
Yeah.
because when we say healing, we're not being ignorant to the reality that it's not always possible. We're not, it's like when we talk about the human aspect of rights and women's rights, we're not just thinking about Western culture, we're thinking about as many as possible that don't have access to this stuff. We are aware, and unfortunately all we can do is put out what we can to guide, even if that is something that has to be self-efficient and done at home within self. I mean, even getting journal books, having books to write on and pencils is just, yeah. It really makes me sit here and I honestly say the same thing over and over again. And this links in with the topic. I just think there is absolutely no point to the existence of struggle. I truly, no matter what anyone says, because people like to really hold on to it like survival, I do not believe that people need to go through famine or poverty or this immense struggle in a human life that is so linear. It can go each way, up, down, sides. It can move in so many different directions and it's out of our control. So I will never be able, and this is me just saying in general, you'll never catch me validating this ideology of need to struggle, because then people can't heal. The holding on to that just cuts off the ability for people to find groundedness in self, to heal from the stuff that has unfolded throughout their lineage and in their life, what was taken from them, what situations they were put into. That's the one reason why I don't validate hustle culture, because hustle culture is ignorant to the reality that people are literally being diagnosed with severe health conditions because of hustle culture. It's just invalidating human to the extent of ignorance and ableism. We said this in episode 2, I believe it was. It's all connects to emotional unavailability because, like I said at the start, people have to do things because they believe they have to, and that can make you detached from self, from your emotions, because you just don't have time to feel, and then you don't have time to heal. Isn't that the thing of capitalism and hustle culture, is that you don't have time to feel, you know, go to work, no time for grief, no time for illnesses, no time for human, which can make you emotionally unavailable because you just don't have time to be a human being. I can't validate the things that people hold on to in this way because all I see is harm. That's all I've ever seen come from this is harm. Even if someone reaches the top line of success, like good on you. If you went through the hustle way to do it, that's your journey. You decided that, fine, right? But there are too many people, especially in the older generation, that we praise we praise them, doing all this stuff, but yet you can clearly see that they're leaning, they're struggling, their feet hurt. What for? For your validation? For you to sit there and say they work so hard and they keep working hard. I'm not telling them to stop living because that's where people take this. They think that if you stop hustling, it means just stop living. It's not that. It's just validating that you have a human body. You have a human body. And when things are coming up within that human body, the emotional availability is resting, is being in a mode of self care, is being in a mode of taking that time to care for health and self, which is something society promotes so much of, like health, 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 but also, work till you die and make sure that you're working horrendous hours. And let's compare that with each other of who suffers more, because then we get the trophy of who suffers more, which is invisible and you don't actually get anything from it, but just the constant comparison. It's a version of emotional unattachment. The comparison, the projection of need to suffer, the hustle culture regime, the survival mode that people think is so normalized. I know that some people find it hard to understand the concept that life is literally all of us floating in the air and we can really go anywhere. But that, I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but I just can't say it enough that the kind of control that you think you have, and I said this in an episode as well, you don't actually fully have. Anything and everything can happen. And I'm literally saying that as a wide spectrum, right? We become also unattached to emotion when we don't realize the human experience. And I posted a TikTok about this. Being avoidant to human is one of the main issues that I see with society, with people, is the avoidance of human emotions, the avoidance of human. So we avoid conflicts, we avoid conversations, we avoid even joy and happiness. We avoid, I've seen this too, and this also entails we avoid things that aren't hustle, aren't productivity. We avoid it. We avoid sitting down for too long, which, yeah, it's not that great for your lower back, but taking a moment, we avoid that. We avoid rest. And I've seen it within family lineage. Rest is like the devil. It's treated like the most heinous thing that you can do for yourself. You know, there's so much shame that society has placed upon that, that people just they feel guilt for resting and they apologize for it. Seeing it play out in the lives of other people, but also myself, I've always come back to the reality of what's the point if I'm not looking after the very thing that keeps me alive and keeps me moving and rolling. Like even just having this calf, this tear in my calf muscle has obviously taken away a lot of things that you're able to do. Imagine if I just hustled through. Would this calf even heal at this point if I just did what hustle culture preaches? It needs 6 weeks to heal. And they literally say, you know, rest, ice, compression, elevate, you know, and even we were talking about this in the episode, second episode, even when you're unwell, there's still this ideology from people around you of keep moving. But yet their version of moving is within that hustle productivity line. So it's always constantly, even unconsciously, being projected whenever human happens. And I've caught it so many times. And even myself, I've caught myself doing it. With this injury, I've caught myself more than anything pushing. Like yesterday, I pushed because I started I wouldn't say walking, but putting pressure on it and then being able to walk with that without crutches. And I kept doing it throughout the day. And then I had this voice in my head that's like, you're pushing it too far. You need to take a break and stop. Like, yay, you can walk, but stop, you know? And I realized later on that night, it hurt a lot more. And the nighttime came, I felt obviously it's going to be an adjustment when you go for a whole month without walking on it. Obviously, it's going to hurt when you start to bring that back in. But I also felt the uncomfortability with pushing it too far today. And I thought, what did I do that for? What did I know I want to move? But when you have an injury, you need to have patience and time. And this is where emotional unavailability and avoidance also plays a part, is how we react to injury and to our own health and how our healing goes. Right. If I kept with this mindset of pushing myself, I could have taught, because I Googled it, right? I had the fear that I was going to, you can actually tear it even more. You can. There are people that have done it on Reddit. There were people saying that they actually tore it even more than when they first tore it. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, no, that's not happening. Not manifesting. That's completely out of the manifesto. That's left the building. I said to myself, we are avoiding that. That is not going to happen. So, in order to do so, I need patience. And that's been difficult through this. It has been. In other valid ways, I'm going to say that. In other valid ways, you know, making it to certain places and doing certain things is valid. But all in all, this shows up in so many forms of our lives that affect us tremendously. Being unavailable to connect yourself enough to know that you need rest. And I know it's not fault because our system has literally been built on our productivity, right? It's slowly, and I'm going to preference this, it is slowly moving past those outdated, didn't need to happen systems. We are definitely moving forward, right? But there are still people that hold on to this and they do not see the repercussions of it and they project it to each other. And when you care about people, this is another thing to think about. When you talk about an element of care, what does that truly mean to you? Because if there's one thing that I know is that when someone is sick, and hey, this ain't me putting myself on a perfection pedestal. I ain't up there, honey. I'm here. I had to learn from my own behavior of my ideologies. When I was taking care of my mum, as an example, I had thoughts of, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, you need to move, I was having those mind, I was having those thought processes. And, she had just gone through a major stroke, at the time, I couldn't see the full expansion of what this was. Now I know. But back then, I had the thoughts. And then I had the anger that came with that as well, the intolerance. And that was my learning experience. Taking care of her was a part of my learning experience, an expansion of care and what that truly means. It's recognizing that when the body is down, the body is down because it needs you to let it heal. It needs you to let it rest. It needs you to let it regenerate like a battery. If people want to go buy the robotic machine that they like to act like our bodies are, think of it like a battery. Eventually, when you have batteries in your remotes, the battery dies, eventually. But the thing about us is that we regenerate. You need it. You need to regenerate. That was one of my greatest learning experiences, taking care of my mum, because I was also going through really complex mental health conditions. So I couldn't really take care of myself. And then taking care of another person, as well as taking care of the house and the bills and so many other things, because other people were avoidant and not putting it fully down. But, I'm probably going to cut that part out. Nonetheless, um, that time was a really good learning experience on reevaluating. It didn't happen then. It's obviously taken a few years to assess that. But that is a really good way of looking at you and understanding how you are holding on to elements of productivity where it shouldn't be there. Productivity, I think, if we were to change the narrative to something a lot more human, which is the purpose of this, you can have hustle. If you want to have hustle, but reiterate it, change the meaning of it, make it more human, because this is the human experience. And I don't understand why we would turn it into something that is against human, right? Balance. Balance. You can have your productivity, because I do. And I love my productivity days. I do, hands down, I do. But I am also aware of balance. I'm aware of it. So, to come back to the point again, emotional unavailability. Emotional unavailability shows up in many different aspects of our lives. The way that we talk to the people around us as well as ourselves, the way that we step forward towards the human experience. So, ill health, the way we handle conflict, the way that we handle situations of trauma, how we hold space for people, which is another thing I'm going to touch on, but I'm going to check in if you want to say something first to anything that I said before.
I think the question to ask yourself is, for what are you working so hard for? And is it actually aligned with your vision of what you want your life to be? Because that's the thing that I've kind of just been delving everything down to. When we speak of hustle culture, when we speak of being successful, productive, all these things, right? They sound great, but what are you working so hard for? What is your image of success? Because that is not the same as these corporations pushing the agenda of being productive. They want to make money and you're the worker. So they want you to work hard so they can make as much possible from your tiny input as a human being in the major conglomeration of whatever business you're working for. And of course, not all businesses operate in that way. Not all people in this world, all countries, wherever, operate in this manner, but many unfortunately do, especially in the West. So what are you working so hard for? Because that's the thing that I immediately connected with when you were speaking of, I got to work hard. I have to do this. I have to do that. Work was my number one excuse for not being there for my friends at a point in time, like earlier in my 20s. Number one excuse. Number one excuse why I couldn't make time. Number one excuse why I couldn't have phone calls. Number one excuse why I couldn't show up. Number one excuse of like not being able to have the emotional bandwidth of dealing with people when they were having a hard time. Not even being able to handle myself because I was pushing myself back, my needs back, what my body needed. And I got to a point because I had a relationship at the time where after it broke through, I realized I was kind of just like sucking them dry of their energy. I was using them to give me energy because I was so drained from my everyday life. And I was like, that is such not just unhealthy behavior, but and not just emotionally absent behavior, but also so unhealthy to me. And I felt so sorry. I apologized to that person. You know, things are good now. But like at that point in time, there were these all along my 20s, there were these minor moments that kind of like, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And it would show up with health problems, it would show up with relationships falling apart, with fights, it would show up with losing a job, when I got sick, God forbid, you know, and being yelled at, and then making myself, oh, I should have shown up for work. I should have done this. I should have pushed through. Why can't my body support me? Dude, I'm working 14 hours a day on my feet, running around doing stuff. I have 2 days off, which I have to do other things during those 2 days. So it's not really rest. Of course, my body's going to shut down. And I realized, especially now over the last few years, having been in recovery from a very serious condition. And I will say this, me slowing down for the last 3 years and being in recovery from the last 3 years of having a very serious heart condition was one of the biggest mentors to me. For you, Ashley, it was taking care of somebody else. For me, it was not being physically capable of doing anything else but to be there where I'm at right now in this moment. There was no escape from it. And that's the thing that I kept returning to in every single area of my life. Things would have to completely fall apart for me to sit there in my misery and actually feel, because life was going to shut it down. If I'm not going to be doing it myself, life is going to force me to. And if you're finding yourself in these cycles, again, listen to it, because the further you try, oh no, I'm going to push through, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to do this next time, I'm going to do this, and you try these little quick hacks of like how to stay healthy and work out and drink this and do that and take these pills, you're avoiding what's actually making you sick. And if that keeps festering within you, it's going to ruin the rest of your life. So again, what are you working so hard for? Because if you gain whatever it is your image of success is, how are you going to embark on enjoying that when you're not physically capable of even being in that space because you're so broken down from all this apathy, not only towards yourself, but also other people? Who are you going to share your success with? Because it's not friends. You've been avoiding them for the last 10 years. You've been avoiding their phone call. You've not been showing up. You've not been there, supportive when they go through things. So what is that really success? And the biggest thing, and this is something I would like to share just because I learned from it, in like, what's the word, like in a third party way. There's this album that was recently released by the artist Halsey. It's called The Great Impersonator. And it essentially goes through her, she was writing heartfelt songs based on her healing journey within her own health crisis in her life. And within the theme of that whole entire album was mortality and success, and finally realizing what life is actually worth living for. And when that album came out, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I immediately connected to it. And then the whole world, I'm telling you, the whole entire music industry was like, she's being over emotional. This is not a great album, and kind of dismissed it. never acknowledging any of the actual themes that were going on within the music industry or within her music. And I was just sitting there and I'm like, this is such a evident situation again, where emotionally shut down people within a society that doesn't actually take accountability of struggle and the hardship that a person can go through, not even themselves, can't even have the energy to be empathetic, is going to see a work of art where somebody is emotionally vulnerable and is actually holding themselves accountable and actually coming to the realization of what's worth living for and what's worth working for and where they're aligning themselves now in a healthier way. They're going to look at that and judge it and make it bad. Oh my God, this is bad. And the same way, if you show up and you're like, I'm going to call in sick because I just need an off day, I need to relax, you're going to be the bad guy. You're not going to be a good coworker. You're going to put all this extra work on your coworkers. How can you do that? Oh my God, you're terrible. You need to get fired. Like, there's this mentality that if I slow down, like Ashley said, if I take a moment to rest, if I take a moment to evaluate what is actually good for me, everything is going to fall apart. People are going to judge you, project on you. And the thing is, that's not true. That is an illusion of the society that we're living in because they themselves are emotionally unavailable. They themselves are not accountable for themselves. And it's interesting because obviously there's this element of people pleasing within that dynamic, I think, for me on my element, because there's this struggle that I had within myself for so long of trying to appease everybody around me, incorporated with toxic hustle culture, incorporated with not being emotionally available to myself. And it's like you're constantly running from something, and it can be anything. And when it comes to avoidance, if I may go back to the beginning of what I said, your self-worth, I think, is very much at the core of that, of like, am I worth this? Can I do this? Or your self-worth can be overpowered by what other people told you your worth is. And so you run around trying to people please, you're doing hustle culture, you're shutting everything human within you down so you can appease to everybody else. And I think it's just, it's like I said, it's deeply rooted in fear and insecurity, because if I don't work hard, I'm not going to be able to pay the bills. If I don't do this, I'm not going to be able to do that. There's always this back and forth. And within society as a whole, through all the trauma our past generations have gone through, our ancestors, alive or passed over, not only is that in showing up within those bloodlines, within how your parents may show up or not show up within your home because they are off working all the time, or projecting onto you because they're stressed from something within their daily life because they're not emotionally available to themselves. So they project onto you. You then carry that with you. Then you have society telling you, you need to show up, you need to go, 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 be like a machine. And then you're shutting yourself down in the human needs that you desire and need for yourself to maintain some kind of normalcy and have balance. But the thing is, there is no balance within that dynamic. And society is suffering immensely right now because it is so focus driven on export, on production, on everything that is not human. It's capitalism. Again, there it is. And it's sad.
It is. You know, what you said reminds me of the movie Soul. And if any of you haven't seen it, haven't, I highly recommend watching it. Obviously, I think you can only watch it on Disney Plus, but I could be wrong. But nonetheless, I was watching Soul the other night, and I watched it literally again the next morning because I don't know, it just felt so, it resonated, you know. And just to give small context, it's really about a man who is waiting for his moment to come. And he sort of just does things while he's waiting for that moment to come. And he lives his life just waiting. Anyway, the moment comes, like an opportunity comes, and then he dies, or essentially goes into a coma, I think is the right way to explain it.
Yeah.
Right? His soul goes into the great beyond. or I think it's before the great beyond. Sorry, yeah, it's before the great beyond. And he obviously is losing it because he's like, I just got this opportunity. I'm not ready to leave, not ready to pass on and pass over. And so he sneaks into the U seminar, which is what it's called, and becomes a mentor for another soul, for a soul that's going to Earth. So this is like pre-Earth, basically, getting them ready for Earth. And then they have their journey. And in that journey, at one point in the movie, they're trying to reconnect him to his body. But it takes a different turn where him and what did they call her? They called her 22, but she's like, she's a soul basically, right? They fall in, she lands into his body, and then he lands into a body of a cat. So the next process of the movie is her going through the experience of living on Earth, right? Because she wasn't finding, and I should have said this before, she wasn't finding, how do I explain this? The
A reason to
souls
live.
had to achieve. Yeah, yeah. The souls had to achieve, I think it was five, um, I can't remember what it was called. They had to get a badge basically to then take the next step into going down to Earth, which is personality traits, things that you want to do. They call it a spark. So your spark. So you need to fill this badge to get that, to get the full, like, I don't know how to explain it. There's five circles in the badge, and you have to fill each circle, and then tick of approval, you go down to Earth, okay? Oh, so she was struggling to find her fifth circle, which literally just because she tried everything. She tried basketball, she tried soccer, but nothing was giving her the will to get that last circle to get her badge to go down to Earth. She didn't see the point in being a baker, a librarian. She didn't see the point. So anyway, she's down in Earth and she's experiencing things. She's experiencing his life in different ways. So fast forward to the end. He actually realizes through her living in his body, because he was a cat, but he realizes from watching her that the point is living. It's not about finding purpose. And that's like in the U seminar, before the great beyond, the souls that are there that before they come to Earth, they're not, trying out basketball, and it doesn't give like the tick of approval because that's going to be their thing and nothing else is their thing. I hope I'm making sense. I hope that you're all on the bandwagon with me. It's just about your loves and your desires, and it's about the joy of living. It's adding to that. So if you love piano, you might love basketball as well, But yet before you came down here, your spark might have just been piano. That doesn't mean it's just it for you. So he realizes that this whole time he's been waiting for the opportunity and he's forgotten about living and the joy of living in every moment of his life, from having a conversation to the barber to eating a pizza, the joys of finding it in just increments of life. And, essentially he helps her get her pass because the last circle for her pass was achieved just from living. And then she went down to Earth. And then when he went back down to Earth, because that's you got to watch the movie anyway, he changed his life and he changed the way that he saw his experiences. So my point in bringing this movie up is that avoidance and emotional unavailability, where does that fit into this, Ashley? Well, I'll tell you. When we are avoidant to the experiences of the human experience, we essentially miss out on so many elements of living and what truly give us joy because we're avoidant of the experiences of that. And this is coming from experience. This is coming from experience of being so focused on just like right in front of me, just being so focused on getting there that I forget everything else around me that brings me joy. Like simply just being around my dogs bring me joy. You know, doing this brings me joy. But I'm not going to lie to you all. In the last, when I found out, when I first started to experience living and the enjoyment of that, even though I've been alive for a majority of my life, I wasn't really living. I was really just surviving. I'm just going to put it that way, right? So when I actually started to experience living, it's great, but then you've got to go through the learning experience of boundaring that. I needed a boundary. And I still am practicing and learning that because I can get hooked on something. And because I haven't experienced that something, I get a little obsessive with it and I get attached to it in a way where nothing else matters until this certain thing happens. Nothing else is relevant and it sucks all the joy out of you. Nina's heard me so many times, just the misery. Because, yeah, there are certain things you don't want to experience and they're happening and you wish they weren't. That's valid, right? But I forget that me sitting outside brings me contentment. Even just looking out my window here and watching the pigeons, sometimes like they fight amongst each other and I'm just watching them, being like, what's your debacle about? Who did what? You know, it's the little things. It really is the little things that we don't see. And if we were shown a slideshow of our lives when we pass on, because there's been countless of people that have had there's been countless of people that have had near death experiences and have come back and said, we basically got a slideshow of our lives. It unfolded. If you saw a slideshow of your life, right, what would you want to change if you wanted to change something, or what would you want to shift? I don't mean change as in just this massive movement. It doesn't have to be that. You give it your own meaning, you give it your own version. But if you looked at the slideshow of your life, are there things that bring you joy, but you don't give energy to them because you're so focused on getting there and movement and hustle and productivity, because that blocks the human experience in so many different ways, only because human beings programmed it to be like that. And I'm going to say this again, I'm going to bring it in there again, because lately I've been doing a lot of research on the Victorian era, just because I want to, not because I have to, because I want to. Because Nina was talking about it too. They essentially, and this is what I truly believe, they essentially wanted the lower class to constantly be available for them, to the point where when it got to ill health, they can discard them. The amount of videos that I've watched on YouTube, it shows me that they want a healthy human being and to work you to ill health. That was the depiction I got from our history. And I still think in this day and age, and I still believe it and I still see it, that it's still relevant, is to work you to ill health or disability. And then ableism kicks in, and then disregarding kicks in, and then people shaming you and guilting you for having a chronic illness, for needing time off work, for needing time off for your period, which is insane to me because a period is painful for a lot of people. I mean, it's just shedding, people, it's shedding. It actually apparently doesn't need, no, let me say that again. Periods don't need to be painful, and that's a conversation that's happening more, but it still is for a lot of women. So the most human thing, the most available thing is to validate that. But we come from a lineage of ignorance to anything but health, in strength, in movement, in productivity. And again, brings back the emotional unavailability. And that's sort of where soul comes in too, is the reminder to break those cycles, because those cycles were only about your movement. They only cared about what you could create for society and what you could do for your bosses and for their businesses. It was always about you giving. all of you to others, for others to have their lives be fulfilled in different ways. I'm not going to say that's everyone, because especially these days, a lot of people have learned, especially people that own businesses, things have changed substantially, but there are still increments and elements of society that continually unfold old crap that did nothing but and does nothing but hinders human beings. And then we watch our loved ones suffer, but we still yet validate why they're suffering, what caused their suffering, because we can't see what it actually is, because we're so programmed to believe that this is the only way to living. I see people in the comment section fighting with other people on this is the way life is. This is the way life is. Who said? Who said? A government? I didn't know that they were like the creator of Earth and the creator of humans. They're not. You believe what you want to believe, obviously, but our governments aren't the creator of people. They're actually in the position they're in to help community. They're meant to be helping. They're meant to be helping community. They're meant to be helping the human race. we know we know though that human beings, they have these needs, and money is such a big thing enough to F people over for it. We see it every day. We're currently seeing it now. So to bring it back, because it could take me like down so many different pathways in saying this, being aware of productivity and hustle culture for you and what it means for you is such a priority. I can't say it enough, because it does shape the way that you hold space for other people and the way that you hold space for yourself. And just to touch on this quickly before I finish my conversation for this episode, my voice goes into silent mode. I really want to touch on the emotional aspect of this and how it affects our relationships and how we communicate even to ourselves. When you're emotionally unavailable, it's not just physical, it's mental and emotional. How you look in the mirror and respond to yourself is a level of emotional unavailability. Because being connected to the body is experiencing like you do with a relationship. Because honestly, your connection to your body, your relationship with your body is similar to the relationship you have with other people as well. It's actually the most important relationship you'll ever have. But like many things, we've been brought up in a very stigmatizing, just illusion version of what the body is and how it should look and how it should be. I'm not even going to go down that route. I'm going to stick to my point. I'm going to try to, at least. When you are emotionally unavailable to your body, to your own emotions, no, you don't think that your connection with your body affects the people in your lives, but unconsciously we project the way that we feel about self externally out there. And I've done it before, and I've seen people do it as well. You don't realize that you don't realize how connected it is to how you internally run, how you internally feel. I can't say it enough. One of the most important things is how you internally feel. And when you're disconnected from that, how do you take in and assess someone else's response and feelings and emotions? How do you sit there and feel about it and respond to it? Because response is a really big thing. It's a really big thing. And I see so many people respond through their emotional unavailability because there are areas that they're blocked in. And it's like a wall that they cannot go further in. They cannot access the emotions to be able to relate and sit, even just sit in the space of it and validate. I'm going to give a quick example, and I'm not going to go into the whole story. I went into into part of the story on a TikTok video to talk about emotional unavailability, but I'm not going to unfold it in this episode. My younger self went through something in grade 1 in primary school. And during the healing of what happened and the aftermath, I was thinking about it recently, and I thought to myself, from the many times that a lot of us have experienced being told, we're attention seeking, crying, the way that people have responded to that, it comes from a level of avoidance of human emotional unavailability. It all just connects with each other. It's avoidance of human. And the effect that that had on my child self has taken a long time to heal because people were not available to listen to her, to hear her, to respond accordingly to what was happening. What happened to her should have been dealt with by the people that preach. Like, I love how adults preach this kind of it's almost egotistical stance of I'm an adult, so I know better. But yet they don't protect a child when it is in dire need, and they can't even protect a teenager or even themselves because there is such an emotional unavailability there. There's an avoidance of multiple degrees. So many adults let her down, and it didn't need to be that way. But they were so unavailable to acknowledge the reality that was right in front of them. I can clearly see when a child is distressed. Even if they're not showing it fully emotional, their physical body shows it, their behavior shows it, right? And yes, you don't need to study to actually learn the signs, right? But in a field of human, and I also understand the times too. Okay, I can validate that understanding of it because it was the early 2000s and everything was stigmatized back then. But I'm also not going to ignore the reality that working in a field of human beings, children, human beings, right, means being available in some extents, right? I'm not going to put the perfection stamp on that because I know people have blockages and there's a certain line and a boundary line that people have, right? And this is not about working on self in the hustle way either, but you can acknowledge and maybe create some expansion with that if you decide to, right? Especially when you're working with human beings, expansion is needed. You have someone feel something about a certain, you can have someone come in and feel completely offended by a certain word, and then someone else comes in and they're completely fine with that word. So it's about you figuring out what's the balance with this. You don't say it around that person, but that other person, it's okay. It's literally an expansion. Like, you need it in this field, in any field that is human, working with human beings, right? So when I thought back to that moment and I thought about how many adults were so unavailable to respond to this, to do something about this. It still happens this day and age. It happens with bullying. It happens with countless of experiences, not just child either, teenager, adults. It's happening everywhere still because people don't have the capacity to respond and be available to what is happening. That is why I said it in one episode. People get angry at billionaires, but they're not seeing their own selves and what they're doing and what they're projecting and how they're acting. It is not a normalization to be emotionally unavailable because what it does and how it truly affects society, I cannot even begin to say it in this episode. I could list what being emotionally unavailable does, and it's not a fault, it's about advocacy. Even the most uncomfortable things have to be seen because they're a part of the human experience. Australia being the third largest consumer of child abuse material, it is so uncomfortable and heinous to validate that. But if we don't, it is allowed to continue. If you're faced with a situation, which a lot of people are, and it's so sickening. And I get it. It's sickening to process this stuff, to know that it's happening, right? But when you're faced with it, it is about how are you going to respond to your child? How are you going to respond to a teenager? If your teenager comes to you and says, this and this happens, how are you going to hold space for it and respond to it? Because it is the very thing that will shape how they heal. It is also the very thing that shapes how they communicate and respond and how they feel and what shapes their emotional system after that. I cannot begin to explain how much it affects people. They either become in a space of acceptance for self and they do the healing and they do whatever they need and they become so motivated in life. And then on the other side, they lose that in some sense. And I mean, again, that's a spectrum, both sides, but still not being responded to and having to heal from the aftermath of something is what so many people have to deal with because society is so blocked in different ways. And I'm going to land my plane in a minute. I've seen, you know, family values being upheld through emotional unavailability. It's such it's such an interesting thing for people to talk about family yet be so detached from human. What's family to people then? Is it just about being happy? Honestly, this is what it seems to me. That family is just about everyone laughing and being happy and supporting each other, but not actually about conversations that are needed because you're all human beings that come with your own individual personalities and traits. There's no conversation. There's no topic of human discussion. People can't talk to each other when certain things are happening that need to be discussed. So it's, to me, it's an illusion. It's an illusion of what's family. If human isn't a part of the factor, then what are you holding onto the title for? So you can just have the title there and play the part that we're a family, we love each other and we listen to each other, but yet there's no actual validation of what's human. It always has grappled my mind that it's such a comfort for a lot of people, but yet it causes people to disconnect from family. Because how can you be around someone who never can validate the human experience and is so avoidant in it? You know, someone comes to them crying and they immediately react in avoidance to, I can't deal with this. I don't want to deal with it. So get over it, grow up, you're strong, handle it. But yet there's a process to that. Essentially, to land my plane, because this discussion can obviously go into another episode, how we respond to the human experience is essentially still creating the ignorance of it and is still creating the avoidance of it. And it really just makes being a human harder. So being available, emotionally unavailable, even if that brings discomfort, even if that brings moments where you want to run, all of that is valid, but it's about being available for it anyway. Because yeah, it just, in a lot of ways, we have to be. We really have to be. And and like I'm saying, there's like different pathways to that. But to have people in your life is to be available to them as well as them be available to you in the ways that connections need to also be able, if you have children, just anybody, hold space for them in the human experience that they have. We help each other heal as well. It's not just psychiatrists and psychologists and counselors and therapists. It's also community that can help each other heal. So if being, so if anything, taking the healing journey in whichever way that needs to be for you, it's worth it. It's worth it to not be a part of someone's story in a certain light. You know, it's worth it to not be the person that your children have to run away from because they just feel like they can't be themselves around you. And I know that sounds like such a fault system, but we're unconsciously not realizing a lot of how things are unfolding from our avoidance. If that's the right way to say it, I think. Anyway, it's worth healing to be available to self and others. It's completely worth it.
Tune in for part 2 of this episode next Sunday.